I come. The city that I come from is at the moment reeling in fear. Everyone thinks we are going to be hit by a nuclear bomb. In fact, when I was leaving to come here, most people thought I was fleeing Delhi in fear of the nuclear bomb. I'm very happy that I accepted Ravi DC's invitation to come here, because I'm absolutely amazed, and I was just telling Paul Zachary, who was an old friend, at the sort of turnout a literary function involving extremely boring writers mostly can get in a state like this, in a city like this. In Delhi, for a literary function, you would be hard put to put together more than 20 people. In Delhi, you have, if you need to do a function which involves more than 20 people in a literary function, you have to grease it with large amounts of alcohol. You have to have it in a 5-star hotel. In Delhi, everybody drinks. Some people read books. I suspect most of those some are Malayalis. After listening to the thunderous oration of Shri Sukumar Azikode, which was so glorious, I also feel like bursting into Malayalam, but unfortunately, English is all I know, and so you'll have to bear with me. I came to journalism in the early 80s, and at the time, in the 80s, journalism was a very combative profession. It was a very adversarial profession, and in the 80s, all the major issues in the public domain were mediated by media. All the major issues, we had the Punjab agitation, we had the Rajiv Gandhi assassination, we had the Assam secessionist movement, we had Fairfax, Bofors, the Mandal problem, the Babri Masjid problem. On every issue, journalists were in the thick of the battle. They were combative, they were adversarial, they opposed governments, they fought governments, they took up issues. And it was one of the reasons that people like me were inspired to become journalists in the early 80s. But by the time the 80s closed and the 90s began, something extremely dangerous began to happen to Indian journalism, and in some sense it has carried on through the 90s. Journalism began to drift into a sort of trivialization. There are various reasons extended for this. The advent of cable television, which came in 1991 and burgeoned very, very quickly. The advent of the page 3, the color paper in the newspapers, which was largely full of trivia. Now, I have no problem with trivia. I myself love trivia. I love to know what actors are eating and what sportsmen are wearing. But at the heart of journalism is always about uncomfortable questions. It cannot be about trivia. In my opinion, there is a great distinction between advertising, public relations, and journalism. And I'm afraid that this distinction has completely blurred in the 90s. And this is a dangerous blurring because at its core, journalism must remain about the uncomfortable questions. It must at its core remain about asking uncomfortable questions to people in power, people who abuse public office and public money. That, in my opinion, in my view, is the core responsibility of journalism. The sad thing is that by the time the 90s ended, by the time 1999 came around and the decade was ending, we were in a really tragic, Indian journalism was in a tragic situation where every major journalist and every major publication could be clearly identified with a political party or a corporate house. So when we launched Tehelka in the early, in 2000, in March 2000, when I quit Outlook, I was a managing editor of Outlook. When I quit it to start Tehelka with some other colleagues, one of the immodest claims we made was that we wanted to bring back some of the hard journalism of the 80s, where journalists were more combative and more adversarial, there were far more exposes, there were far more investigations, there were many more uncomfortable questions being asked. It was an immodest claim. We just made it because we thought maybe we needed to say something new. As things turned out, we were able to break a few big stories. We broke a story on match fixing in cricket. It led to a big hue and cry. It led to a but later they learned that even he used to take bribes, but in this case, he had become a little suspicious. There have a lot of questions have also been raised about the kind of journalism. After we broke this story, I had hundreds of journalists visit my office in the months that followed. And almost every white journalist who used to visit the office used to ask me, the parting question always was, how come, Mr. Tejpal, you don't have sex scandals in this country? And my answer always used to be that in the hierarchy of scandals, for India, the sex scandal comes really low. The only kind of scandal that really matters in India is the financial scandal. And that is because we are a poor country, we are a poor democracy. Money siphoned off, money robbed hurts us. It hurts development, it hurts ordinary people. So the only real kind of scandal that we need to worry about is the financial scandal. And so I come back to what I said earlier, that as in Tehelka, as journalists, we are not interested in the private lives of anybody. What interests us is the misuse and abuse of public office and public money. And to expose that, we think all means are fair, because the kind of political animal we are dealing with now cannot be easily dealt with on a purely moral basis. I said a number of things on March 13th, none of which have been paid heed to. I'm saying this because in Tehelka we have lived through an extraordinary year. At one level we have received incredible goodwill and acclaim from the people. Wherever I go, wherever any of us go, we get the most astonishing goodwill and acclaim and expectations from the people. But on the other hand, we have suffered a very, very venal and shameful onslaught from the government. The government has been on our case for the last year and 3 months. I mean, they have tried to torment us in all kinds of ways. In fact, despite all our success, despite everything we have done, despite the fact that everybody in this country, from owners of companies to grassroots workers, support us and love us, you will be surprised to know that since we broke the story, Tehelka has failed to raise a single rupee of investment from anybody in India. In fact, even as I speak, we are going through a really difficult time. We have not been able to pay salaries for 4 months. And even so, the government with all its departments, whether it's the Enforcement Directorate, whether it's the Taxation, the Revenue IRS, they are all on our cases. They send us absurd notices. They attack us on absurd conspiracy theories. We have been snared in the Venkateswamy Commission of Inquiry, where in the last 12 months, 13 lawyers have represented Tehelka. I mean, which media company in India can afford 13 lawyers over a period of 1 year and the commission is not even over? So we are being bled white in all kinds of ways, and we are being troubled. At the same time, I'm very hopeful and I'm very optimistic that Tehelka will survive. The point I'm trying to make here is that governments are increasingly becoming intolerant of any kind of criticism. And the public and the media seem to be unable to force them to be accountable for anything. Perhaps because we live in Delhi, we feel much closer to it, and we feel the danger of it all the time. We've seen something very, very similar happen in Gujarat. We've seen how the government, both at the state level and at the central level, has chosen to attack the media instead of act on what the media has shown. And I personally believe that this is always the first sign, it's the first footfall of fascism. I think we can all hear it if you just bother to listen. Attacks on media, instead of addressing problems, are, in my opinion, always the first footfall of approaching fascism. And this is something we need to worry about a great deal. Because the subject matter of my talk today is Tehelka media and fascism, I need to say a few words about media and what its role ought to be. I mean, because it's becoming increasingly controversial in public affairs. There is always a controversy about, did media do right? Should they have reported this? Should they have not reported this? Are they taking sides? Are they prejudiced? You know, do they represent a party, or are they independent? You know, the Indian folklore, Indian mythology offers 3 very good precedents for 3 different kinds of journalism. We have the journalism of Narad the Muni, who takes one set of information to another set of people and twists it and misrepresents it to create trouble. There is that kind of journalism. Then there is the journalism of Sanjay. In the Mahabharata, Sanjay tells the story of the Mahabharata as it occurs to Dhritarashtra. And at one point, Dhritarashtra actually tells, when Sanjay is telling him about his sons being massacred, Dhritarashtra accosts him and says, how can you be so incredibly calm and objective when you tell me these gory tidings? And Sanjay says, my job is to only tell you what is happening and nothing more. And that is one kind of journalism. It's the kind of reportage which does not take positions, but reports things as it is, and it's a valid reportage. And then there is the journalism exemplified by Krishna, which is who acts as a moral arbiter. His kind of journalism operates from a moral viewpoint. It has a moral center. And so when he interprets information, when he passes out information, whether it is to the Pandavas or to the Kauravas or to anybody else engaged in the battle, he slants it or interprets it or projects it in a way that the moral center of things holds. Today, I believe that it's the third kind of journalism, the Krishna kind of journalism, that is incredibly important. I think journalism needs a moral center. I think this country is in deep trouble. Being here, one doesn't feel it, and it's wonderful to be here. It's all green and lovely. But if you live in Delhi, you have a deep sense of distress all the time because the corridors of power are very close to our houses and they echo with all kinds of dangerous things. I think we need a journalism of the Krishna kind with a moral center and with an ability to operate from a strong moral viewpoint. I think we also, because the subject matter of my speech encompasses fascism, I think one needs to take note of the crisis of communalism. I think corruption is a problem in this country, and we in Tehilka and me myself are associated with anti-corruption journalism. But in my opinion, today, the far greater challenge, the far greater danger in front of India, much more than corruption, is communalism. I think corruption, in a sense, as I was laughing with Paul just now, is that corruption at the end of the day is egalitarian. Everybody from the PM to the big boss is in some level compromised and corrupt. So there is a kind of egalitarian quality to corruption. And we can deal with it, we've dealt with it for many years. But I think communalism is the kind of cancer of the soul that will, if anything, will destroy this country, if anything will tear this country apart. I think it's communalism. It's happened in the past. There is no reason to believe that it will not happen again if this fault line is not closed. This fault line needs to be closed as quickly as possible before it tears this country apart. In this, I think citizens need to engage. I personally, for 20 years as a journalist, had always believed and operated as a cardinal principle that a good journalist should never veer into activism, that a good journalist's job was a job that Sanjay did for Dhritarashtra, that he reports and he observes and he analyzes, but he never becomes active. But I have to say that today, I don't believe that anymore. I believe every citizen in this country needs to engage, needs to actually be part of the political processes, of the processes of public life. If we are to somehow stem the rot, there is a kind of civilizational decay and deterioration on. We need to work on stemming that, and that requires a very engaged citizenry. I have to also say that I feel Indians as citizens are an extremely frightened people. We are a very afraid people. We are always afraid. We are always afraid of authority. We are always afraid of bosses. We are always afraid of government. And I'm saying this, and it's true universally, it's not true just for India, that when a citizenry becomes scared, the more scared the citizenry becomes, the more draconian governments become. The only way to keep governments in place and accountable is to have an element of fearlessness, an element of irreverence and insolence. A little less fear is roughly what I'm talking about. I'd like to thank Ravi once again for calling me here. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I have dozens of wonderful Malayali friends, from O.V. Vijayan to Arundhati Roy to Paul and many others. But it is the first time I'm visiting Kerala, and I hope that I will be coming here all the time because it's clearly a beautiful state with extremely wonderful audiences and people who actually read books and come to listen to writers. Thank you.